Hey everybody, I'm Jay, Amico. I work at Yeti, and I'm going to be talking to you guys about the very first sort of subject matter that got me looking into UX out of a development boot camp way back in the day. And that was this thing called effective computing and Rosalind Picard. So I created this talk because I noticed while I was at my boot camp that there seemed to be two mutually exclusive experiences of very high emotions and then a lot of intelligence, and not a lot of like mix between the two. So I started looking into this area of effective computing. The original point of artificial intelligence was this idea of a better version of a human, like a humanity on steroids with better brains. RoboCop, Watson from Jeopardy. The drive now is more towards training our machines to better interpret our emotional cues as users and drivers. Rosalind Picard was a woman pioneer software engineer. She was also blonde. She was working in chip design and content retrieval back in the day. She was pretty sensitive to being the only woman kind of in this field, and also to being a woman that was interested particularly in emotion. Her original quest as a developer was to build artificial intelligence based on replicating what they refer to as the higher function of the brain, including visual and auditory cortexes. She continues her work, but gets a little distracted when she reads this novel called The Man Who Tasted Shapes, a story written on the subject of synesthesia. Our old design director, Billy, has synesthesia, and synesthesia is also pretty prevalent in genius musicians. So Pharrell's got synesthesia. I can't remember the second really famous person that has it, but it's a pretty interesting condition. It's this condition that causes a blending of the senses. So colors are connected to letters and numbers. Smells and taste can get connected to music, or touch to vision. So it's like your senses are crossing and you're tasting colors and seeing numbers, things like that. Lady Gaga and Pharrell. So she begins her study in the lab at MIT. She starts looking specifically at the limbic system's role in our decision making. This is that ancient part of the brain, the lizard brain, thought to control memory, attention, and emotion. Her early work in the media lab was focused on improving the overall user experience with machines. Computers at this time were seen as frustrating to humans who were relating to them as the intrinsically social creatures they are. And on this, I've got a couple of statistics. 80%, and again, this was before I went into UX, 80% of people admitted to having become frustrated with their computer. 33% described seeing a colleague shouting abuse at theirs. 24% admitting hitting their screen or keyboard. One chef threw his in a deep fat fryer. Another repeatedly shot his monitor and hard drive with a shotgun. So there's a lot of sort of cases where there's a lot of frustration going on between the users and their technology. I'm sure we've seen some of these cases at Yeti, probably from me. We emote at our machines, and when they don't respond to us appropriately, get very, very upset. Which brings us to one of the big UX nightmares, which is Clippy. Clippy doesn't listen to your needs, and he doesn't care what you want. He's going to dance in the face of your fury. It doesn't matter how many times you ask him to get off the screen. He dances back on. This is not intelligent behavior. This is emotionally unintelligent behavior. Microsoft worked with MIT to help Clippy interpret when he was most wanted and unwanted by the user. They actually had users in the lab with a squeezable mouse, and they would measure the amount of annoyance as Clippy continued to make his reappearances. So they wanted to make Clippy sort of smarter about when he was wanted and when he wasn't. He wasn't wanted a lot, which is kind of the conclusion there. So Clippy ended up kind of sad in the corner, but the users were a little bit happier. So back in the MIT lab, Rosalind begins working on something called the Q sensor. This early case use emotionally mapping meltdowns in people, emotional meltdowns in people with certain conditions that made it difficult for them to communicate with words or facial expressions how they were feeling during this meltdown. The Rosalind and the MIT kids definitely kept collecting the data. They didn't know what it was going to be used for, but they thought it was going to be good. This huge library of mapping emotions to what the face actually looks like. Lots of feels. Thousands of hours of data, so much data. What are we going to do with it? Okay, at this point, she has this meeting, this chance encounter with someone that was listening to her give a lecture about artificial intelligence, and specifically the challenges she was facing in getting her machines to better understand what was going on with their users. An audience member ended up speaking to her about the relationship he felt existed between effective engineering and his work with his autistic brother, and helping his brother to interpret the emotional and social cues of society, which was challenging for his brother because he didn't relate to people in what we would consider a somewhat normative social way. Fascinated by the possibility that she could borrow from the autism theory to build an emotionally intelligent machine, she actually contacted Simon Baron-Cohen, yes, cousin of comedian Sasha, who was building a taxonomy of emotional states so that people could communicate using their faces. And he had basically a video database of 6 actors doing 4,000 permutations of 24 different emotions, not just happy or sad, but nuanced states such as confused or seductive. He used the videos in a study teaching autism sufferers to interpret the expressions to ease their interactions in the outside world. What's the problem with this? There's a certain group that's really interested in this database, and that's marketing, because they're really fascinated by the state of your face communicating an emotion without you even saying something before it. So if they can capture that in FaceTime or in terms of how you look at their product, that's worth a lot of money to them. It's a little bit different than the autism direction, but you can see how that would work. Political campaigns also interested in it, advertising, basically using this as a more advanced version of the lie detector. Effective engineers want to keep this database and its technology open sourced and used for good, but the data is valuable and therefore it is subject to monetization. So this is sort of an ethical issue with these sorts of databases and the connection between facial expression and an emotion that can be interpreted. What is the point of all this? The point of it, especially for when I was presenting to my fellow developers, was that feelings are really here to stay. We're increasingly attached to our technology, our phones and our laptops, but our emotion is not often transferred to this format. The user experience is a social and emotional interaction, and by integrating emotion into machine intelligence, we can enrich the interaction beyond something as simple as liking a button. We can seek to create a more sophisticated user experience by creating a better kind of artificial intelligence with effective computing. So the conclusion here is don't be afraid of your feelings, no matter how high up on computing you want to go or in what area you're in. They're part of intelligence, they're part of machine intelligence and learning, and we can use them for good, especially software engineers, especially my hack writers. And then I kind of left this here. We were in the middle of our projects. This was a good reminder that it was okay not to know what we were doing. And that's it. Thanks for your time.